Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be talking about the culmination of David Gordon Green's Halloween saga, Halloween Ends. The film is directed by David Gordon Green. It's written by Paul Brad Logan, Chris Bernier, Danny McBride, and David Gordon Green. It stars Jamie Lee Curtis, Andy Matichak, James Jude Courtney, Rohan Campbell, Will Patton, Jesse C. Boyd, and others. The logline plot synopsis is the saga of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode comes to a spine-chilling climax in this final installment of this trilogy.
Come and get me, motherfucker.
So, yeah, Halloween Ends. Completely not divisive, completely uninteresting. Nobody's talking about it. And if they are talking about it, let me tell you something. They love it. Not really. Not really. So, Halloween Ends. Before I talk about Halloween Ends, I guess I'll talk about what I think of the other David Gordon Green movies. Very briefly, in the Halloween franchise writ large. I'm a fan of the first Halloween. I think the first Halloween is an exceptionally well-made movie. It's one of these seminal pictures, I think, for just a genre and also for low-budget filmmaking. It showed you what you could do with very little money and just having a good direction or a good director and good actors and intriguing, provocative concept. Introducing the world to the shape, the boogeyman, kind of taking these archetypes. These archetypes of monsters and how they're kind of these unstoppable forces of nature. And they're unpredictable. You don't know anything about them. And they're dangerous because of that. There is a little bit, there's a little preempting with Michael Myers, and there's a little bit of a psychodrama because we do know why he ended up in a mental institution. But we don't know really much about what happened in the middle. And no, I'm not going to get into the Rob Zombie movies that explores that stuff. But we don't really know much about that. So you don't really know much about Michael Myers other than that he killed his sister and his family and and he's the personification of evil, as Donald Pleasance would love to say. Evil. He's evil. He's evil incarnate, just running around the town like a maniac. My God. Amazing. Donald Pleasance is so good. He's even good in all of the Halloween movies that he's in, even the later ones. 4, 5, and 6. Even then, he's fun. He's such a good character actor. He's so much fun as Dr. Loomis. But yeah, so, and that's why I like that one so much. And as far as the franchise itself goes, like larger than just the first one, like I enjoy them well enough. But one of the things I always found really interesting about Halloween is how willing it was to kind of just upend everything and change constantly. Sometimes very cynically driven, sometimes for creative reasons. I think, however you feel about the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, that is his vision. That's what he wanted to do. Halloween 3 was kind of the fulfillment of what John Carpenter originally thought this series should have been, as like an anthology series that just told spooky, weird stories that took place on Halloween. 4, 5, and 6, they formed this little weird trilogy about some sort of the Thorn cult and all that kind of crazy stuff, and about how like Michael Myers is actually summoned by a cult to perpetrate evil. He truly is literally evil personified. I've always kind of appreciated that, and I've always enjoyed the goofiness of the series. It's not my favorite. I think the older I've gotten, I've settled on Friday the 13th as being my preferred goofy slasher series. But I've always had a thing for Halloween. I've always had at least a passing interest in it. So when I heard that David Gordon Green was going to be the one to kind of bring the series back and do one of these reboot cool things where we're disregarding everything but the first movie, and Jamie Lee Curtis was on board, coming back again for another reboot. If you know, Halloween H2O is actually another movie that discounts most of the series, except that one included a Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2. It took that into consideration for that story. But so she was coming back, so I had a lot of interest because I thought David Gordon Green was a novel choice to be part of this franchise. I even thought it was funny that one of his longtime cohorts, Danny McBride, was on the writing team, which is surprisingly enough, like, he actually shows through a lot in these scripts.
Your partner, the greatest partner in the world, made an arrangement with the Vietnamese folks at the restaurant and had them make you your very own peanut butter and jelly banh mi sandwich.
That sounds disgusting. I'm not gonna eat that.
It's a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
I know, but it's a Bonaparte thing.
Banh mi.
Pardon me?
Banh mi.
Pardon me?
So I was looking forward to it. And as they've come out, my brief thoughts of the first one, I thought was okay. I think like it's kind of like the Force Awakens of this trilogy, where it's like, let's get back to basics. Let's reestablish Michael Myers as a terrifying force of nature. Let's just make it about a night on Halloween, and this guy's walking around killing people, and Laurie Strode comes against them, and then ends up being has a theme of trauma, of PTSD. That's how Laurie's felt about this. Her entire life has been consumed by the events of that night in 1978. And then, so I liked that one well enough, but I thought it was fine. Because it's kind of like a loose remake of the original. It follows a lot of the same beats, has a similar structure. But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was if they had never made any more, I thought it was a fairly satisfying conclusion to that Laurie story. But I knew that they wanted to make more of them. I knew that they had thought of this as more of a trilogy. They never knew, though. I found out the other day. They never knew with each subsequent film if they were going to be able to make the next one. So when they made 2018, they didn't know that they had the green light for Halloween Kills. And then they didn't know that they had the green light for Halloween Ends until Halloween Kills came out. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But they did have some sort of plan. Then Halloween Kills came along, and I did actually a pretty long, almost like a 20-minute rambling review of that. So you can go back and check that out if you'd like. It was a movie that I didn't really know how to feel about the first time I saw it. And over the years, since it came out, what did it come out in 2021? Oh, so the year that it's come out, I've watched it a bunch of times. I find it a very fascinating movie. It's a very weird movie. It's aggressively doing its own thing. It's kind of the metal version of Halloween. It's fucking brutal and intense and crazy and operatic, and it's getting into themes of trauma again, but expanding that out. The first one's about Laurie and how it affected her immediate family. This kind of deals with how the town collectively has dealt with Michael Myers, and how some people in that town have never really been able to let it go. And as a consequence, the town has never really been able to let it go. So there was a nice little thematic through line there. And I know it's kind of a controversial movie in the series, in this new trilogy, but I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's better than people give it credit for often. It is goofy, and it's kind of over the top and weird in ways, and there are choices that you just don't quite maybe totally understand or even agree with sometimes.
We need all of you. Evil dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight.
All right.
The tone is a little all over the place, but I tell you, the more I've watched it, the more I've come to really appreciate the kind of disparate tones of the movie and how well it actually all melds together by the end of the flick. So now we come to Halloween Ends. I didn't have really giant expectations for it. I was looking forward to it. I actually didn't even watch a trailer for it until like a week and a half ago. My wife and I revisited Halloween Kills in anticipation of watching Halloween Ends, and then we ended up just rolling into the trailer for Halloween Ends, and it definitely piqued my interest, and I was looking forward to it. Like I said, I'm not a super fan, but I do like them, and I was just curious, well, how are you going to wrap this up? What are they going to do? And I would say this: I think that while this is the last thing most people, myself included, expected out of Halloween Ends, it is entirely appropriate. It is exactly what this franchise has been building towards. Now, I want to warn everybody, I'm going to go full spoilers. I just want to kind of talk openly. I don't want to have to worry about being nebulous or obtuse. I just kind of want to dive in. So this story is about the echoes of trauma, how trauma affects things in a larger sense, and also wraps that into this idea that evil persists, evil never ends. The boogeyman will always exist, whether it's Michael Myers or not. People will always project the boogeyman onto somebody. Everybody wants a finger to point for their ills and why they feel a certain way about their town's culture, etc. Everybody's looking for a scapegoat. And sometimes you may be wrong about that. You may be mistaken. And you may mistreat somebody, and then that hatred, all that trauma that happened from 1978 coming forward, and Laurie's involvement in it, and the people in that town kind of keeping this legend alive, keeping that sense of pain and loss alive, that sense of danger, that sense of terror alive, will at some point create a new boogeyman, create a new evil presence. And that's kind of what this movie ends up being about. It's not really about Michael Myers. It's about the long-term effects of Michael Myers and the long-term effects of violence and legends, and how we keep them alive, even to our own detriment, because we can't move past things. We have a hard time letting go when bad things happen. And this movie's about that. So you have your character, what's his name? Let me see here. I want to get it right. Played by Rohan Campbell Corey, who ends up being kind of this dude that's becoming the new Michael Myers. He's going to become the new terror of the town because everybody already treats him that way, because he was babysitting a kid one night, and a tragic accident occurs where the kid gets knocked off a banister and falls to his death into the living room floor, or the entranceway floor.
What was that?
It's a totally brutal scene. Like, you don't see it coming. It's the last thing you're expecting, because when you watch it, this kid comes over, he's babysitting this little kid. The little kid's being a shit. He's watching the thing on TV. He's giving this guy the business. He's giving him a hard time. He's giving Corey a hard time. And you're just kind of waiting for Michael Myers to show up. So when not only does he not show up that night, something incredibly tragic happens. Cut to credits. Halloween ends, which has the same font as Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I think actually all of the movies have followed the fonts, and the posters have emulated like the kind of the color scheme of Halloween 1, 2, and 3 from back in the day. And then you don't see Michael Myers until 40 minutes into the movie. And my contention is I don't think Michael Myers is actually in the movie. I don't think he's real in the movie. Because part of the story is the idea that Laurie, because of her obsession with Michael Myers, her inability to let it go, actually caused all this stuff to happen. And they're like, you teased that crazy old man. You teased him. You teased him, and you made it so he wouldn't stop. And he came and he killed all these people and he created all this havoc, which is like partially true and also very unfair, because there's this sense of victim blaming. Same thing goes for Corey. Corey also gets accosted by the townies. No matter where he goes, he's not allowed to move past it. He's not allowed to have a good time. In the same way that Laurie sometimes is not allowed to move past it. But the thing is, Laurie has accepted things. Laurie has come to terms with it. It's been 4 years when this story starts in earnest. It's been 4 years since the events of 2018. And Laurie has kind of put her life back together. Or at least tried to. She's trying to come to terms with it. She's writing a book.
That makes you want to rip off your shirt and show grief your fucking tits and say, you know what? Let's go.
And that was one of my things, one of my clues that maybe a lot of this isn't literally happening. Because it bookends with Laurie writing a book, no pun intended. Calm down. So I think that there's an element of it that this is like a psychodrama happening a lot inside people's heads. I think all of the stuff between Corey and Michael Myers is just Corey having to deal with the notion of being treated like that, of being treated like a boogeyman. So he's basically kind of bullied into it. And because he has that kind of that sense memory from growing up in Haddonfield about Michael Myers and what Michael Myers represented and the evil of Michael Myers, that he kind of gravitates towards it. Now, there may be something to it. Like, when most of the stuff with Corey and Michael Myers happens inside of a sewer. They even show like Corey gets bullied. He gets thrown over like a bridge or an overpass or whatever, and there's into like a homeless encampment, and you see him being dragged into a sewer pipe, and at some point Michael Myers grabs him, and then Michael Myers sees something in his eyes, sees that pain, sees like an heir apparent basically. But one of the things I noticed about that scene, one of the things that occurred to me immediately. So the Corey guy he's in the sewer, he's like all disoriented, he's looking around, he's going to leave the sewer, and then Michael reaches through a bricked up, there's like a crack in a bricked up wall, and he reaches through it and he grabs him. And I was like, well, how does Michael get in there? Like, where is that? Like, he's behind a wall. It's almost like he's been awakened. The spirit of Michael Myers has been awakened. So I kind of like in my own head canon, I was like, oh, maybe this kid was fucked up and went and hid in the sewers. Like, and we're seeing like what's playing out in his internal drama, and maybe he just found a dead Michael Myers and he found the mask. That's kind of what I thought about when that all the stuff in the sewer was happening. Any scene between him and Michael Myers in the sewer, I figured that's what was going on. Even there's scenes, where Corey starts adopting the attitude, and he's wearing like this clown mask, and he's like starts killing people, and Michael Myers appears to kind of save the kill at the last minute. Almost supernaturally, as Michael Myers is one to do. But I think they were trying to demystify him in the other movies and kind of make it be like, well, he's kind of a crazy, amped up psychopath. Maybe there isn't something so much supernatural about him, but he's just like a beast. He's like an animal, and part of that is because he's been treated like an animal his entire fucking life. He's been institutionalized. Since the time he was like 9 or 10 years old, and then he gets out for a night, and then he goes back into the institution, and until 45 years later. So he's like more, all of his humanity has been completely stripped away from him. Because there's all sorts of crazy shit happens to Michael Myers, right? Like at the end of Halloween Kills, he gets the shit kicked out of him by the townies, and you're like, how could somebody survive? He gets his head kicked in. All sorts of crazy stuff. But if you're like a crazy mongoloid psychopath who has no sense of humanity left, maybe your adrenaline, maybe you could just pull through the moments, right? Until you couldn't anymore. So maybe like Michael Myers goes in the sewers and just dies. It would kind of be, and to me, it would be a weirdly, oddly fitting end for their version of Michael Myers. I think like kind of what they were presupposing about the character and what they wanted you to take away from the character himself is that like he's just a crazy fuck. He's just a bad person. He's a psychopath. And he's obsessed. He has an obsession, a singular obsession with his house. That's what you find out in Halloween Kills. It's really not so much about Laurie. It's just about getting to that house, and everybody else involved in it wants to conspire, whether intentionally or not, to bring about this kind of confrontation with Laurie and Michael Myers. So in this movie, I think there's a big showdown, with Laurie Strode and Michael Myers at the end, and then there's this big funeral procession. They strap Michael Myers to the hood of a car and drive around the town, and everybody gets in a big funeral procession. They head down to the junkyard and they throw him in a grinder, and it's fucking gruesome. But to me, I was just like, I don't think any of this is literally happening. I don't think even she fights Michael Myers. I think she fights Corey. That's who I think she actually fights. Because we see there's a scene where she like stabs Corey in the neck, because the altercation starts with Corey, and then she kind of dispatches Corey, and then something happens with her granddaughter. Her granddaughter comes in, thinks that she did it. She's upset because of all the stuff that's been happening in the story. But I think it's actually just Corey the whole time. I think it's Laurie having to kind of confront her own culpability, and because she's the victim, she's the one that lived, she's always going to be the center of gravity for this boogeyman story. She always will be. Even the person that ends up taking up the mantle still has some sort of obsession with Laurie Strode. There's definitely some contrivance there. You could suggest Laurie's granddaughter wanting to become romantically involved with Corey. It's a little hokey. It's a little contrived, but I was able to just kind of let it go. I just kind of rolled with it. I didn't really think about how it was kind of, like I said, hokey and contrived. I just kind of let it go, and it plays out fine in that way because it's more just like metaphor about about like the idea that there's like diverging pathways that people can take based on how they're treated by society. You have Laurie's granddaughter, and then you have Corey, and they're both very angry. They keep saying they want to burn it down, but they both mean very different things by that phrase, right? He thinks like, oh, we're going to burn it down means we're going to kill everybody. Laurie's granddaughter, what's her name? Allison. Thank you, IMDb. Allison, she thinks that means like we're just going to pack up and leave. And that's her intention. But Corey needs to go kind of sow his wild oats. He's got to get revenge. He's got to get revenge on all those bullies, which provides some great splatter, gore, slasher movie stuff. Some of it's actually pretty fun. It's actually kind of a more mean-spirited movie than I think most of the Halloween movies are in general. Although I thought Halloween Kills was actually pretty mean-spirited in terms of like when you watch like the slasher scenes, they're pretty fucking brutal. This one almost like kicks it up a notch. A little bit in terms of like the the cruelty of what's going on. And then you have the final confrontation with Laurie and Michael. It all feels very symbolic. It doesn't feel very literal to me. I think there's even a reading of it that Laurie is trying to kill herself. And this is like the psychodrama that's playing out, is that she's fighting Michael Myers. Like she feels like, because she's the center of gravity for this boogeyman, for this story, that it's inescapable for her. So the only thing she could possibly do is maybe commit suicide, because they show her calling in a suicide tip to the police department, and then she has a showdown with Michael Myers. She's like, oh, you thought I'd kill myself, huh? I don't think any of that's really happening. I gotta say, I don't think much of that is actually literally happening. Maybe some of the stuff with Corey is, but I sincerely think that she was planning on killing herself. And somebody pointed it out to me, my wife pointed this out to me, that some of the wounds that Laurie has, like on her neck, and some of the bruising, etc., actually mirrors some of the wounds on Michael Myers himself. And it would make sense, like, if it was a metaphor that her granddaughter is the one that comes in and saves her and stops her. It's, to me, I don't, like, I didn't really know how I felt about the movie, like, when the credits rolled. I was a little, like, not indifferent about it, but I was intrigued about it. The thing about this movie is it's more interesting than satisfying. Because it's not straightforward at all. And I think there's a lot of meat to chew on. I think, the reaction to this has been pretty negative. People not liking it at all. It seems like there's two camps. There's people that really love it, and there's people that like absolutely despise it and think it's a complete betrayal of what they were promised, and Michael Myers and Laurie Strode, and how could this be it? But I think if you think about the trilogy and what it's been building towards thematically, I think it's completely appropriate. And it's actually the most creatively interesting thing you could have done with this story. Even if most of it's not literally happening. That's not this. I'm not saying everything is not happening, but I do think that there is definitely a read that you could have on this movie. That a lot of what's going on, at least with Corey and Laurie, is going on in their heads. For Laurie, it's her writing her book, finding catharsis, trying to escape this victim status, and then to have that turned on her in a certain respect, and then be blamed as if she was also the monster. And then have, obviously, this horrible tragedy with this Corey kid, him being constantly hounded and goaded, and nobody trusts him, and nobody likes him, and nobody wants to give him a chance, and all the adults treat him oddly, all the kids are mean to him. Like, it's some of it's silly. On paper especially, it's silly. I think it operates a lot better in the movie than it sounds like describing it. But I just, that's the sense I got from it. Like, that not a lot of that stuff. I really sincerely, I don't think Michael Myers is literally in this movie at all. It's just the spirit of Michael Myers, not in a supernatural way either, in a completely like kind of metaphorical way. It's like his spirit, his presence, his legend. It's consumed this town, it's consumed these people. And this is them just kind of working through it. So at the end of the day, having said all that, I really liked it. Maybe I should have started with that. I really liked it. I ended up watching it twice, not back to back, but I watched it like Saturday night, and then I ended up rewatching it on Sunday night. Just because I couldn't stop thinking about it. It gets in there. It's like a little brain worm. It gets in there, and you just I was just pouring over stuff in my head, and I really just wanted to watch it again. And the second time I watched it, I really started leaning very heavily towards like, this is really cool. This is really interesting. This is way more interesting than just making another fucking Halloween movie. They already made 2 of them. Halloween and Halloween Kills. They made 2 Halloween movies. They made like a traditional Halloween movie, and then they made like a balls to the wall fucking metal Halloween movie. And now this is the come down. This is like, take a breath and let's really think about these experiences. Let's think about this brutality. And I really appreciated it for that. Other things I liked about the movie, just kind of the more technical stuff. I really like the cinematography. I think it's a really interesting looking movie. It has kind of like this, what's the vibe of it? The vibe. What's the visual vibe? It feels like it kind of goes back to a little bit more of a 70s color palette. Things feel a little bit more muted and cold. There is kind of a distance to it. It's not a very warm film. It feels like you're meant to put you in more of a psychological space than a heartfelt space, right? You're supposed to be thinking of the psychodrama, and I think a lot of the visual design and the aesthetic design is there to kind of reinforce those feelings. And also, but the thing that I absolutely loved, was the score. This is my favorite Halloween. In any of the Halloween movies, this is my favorite version of the variations of the main theme. I would buy this on vinyl in a heartbeat. It's excellent. I have actually just been listening to it just on my own, just bringing them up on YouTube and just listening to the score. I think they did some really clever, interesting things. To me, it was the most interesting variations on the main theme. And then there's a few other pieces sprinkled in there that are pretty good. There's also a few indie pop songs, because part of the movie is also a love story. Will love conquer all? Does love bloom on the slasher field? Not really. Well, it does, but with very tragic consequences. Okay. So yeah, I really loved it. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Even just talking about it now, this is the first time I've really talked about it, spoke my mind about it. I like it even more. It's a good movie, and I think it's the appropriate end to what they were building towards. And it kind of frustrates me a little bit, especially with franchise fans, etc. They just want you to shovel the same fucking thing to them over and over again. Anybody this is actually a very clever way to do this. This is people were trying to compare this to The Last Jedi. Oh, it's trying to subvert your it's subversion. It's just subversion for subversion's sake. In that movie's case, that's very true. In this movie's case, it's not true, because they made 2 movies that earned this third movie. They earned it. They worked for it. They built towards it. The thing with The Last Jedi that's so like off-putting is that it comes out of fucking nowhere and it doesn't feel like a sequel to the movie that came before it. That's why that movie feels so disconnected, so dissonant from like being a Star Wars movie. This still feels like a Halloween movie. I think it establishes that, and also it kind of embraces the form of the original trilogy. It embraces the idea that it's a third Halloween movie by giving you something completely different. By giving you something that you didn't expect and taking everything into an interesting territory. I don't think it's going to work for everybody. In fairness, I don't think it's going to work for everybody. It worked for me, even though I would say, like, you know, to be fair, I wouldn't have minded a more straightforward Halloween movie. I wouldn't have minded a well-directed, well-acted, more straightforward slasher slow showdown with Laurie and Michael. I wouldn't have minded that. But I think this is one, much like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, that's really going to age. It's going to age very well. I think this trilogy as a whole will age very well. Which is surprising because I don't love the first one. I don't love Halloween 2018. And just for the kind of reasons I said at the top, like I think it's fine. I think it's a good like kind of back to basics Halloween movie, but it's kind of unremarkable in that way. There's a couple like really great sequences, some great shots. I think the ending is pretty good. You know, when the three generations of Strode women have to come together and defeat Michael Myers, like that stuff works. You know, we Strode women are strong. We're strong. We Strode women. I say that all the time when I'm watching these movies with my wife. It drives her crazy. Every time I see a Strode woman, I say, "We Strode women. We're strong. We could defeat this evil." She's like, "They're from fucking Illinois. From fucking Illinois. They're not like Southern belles." I'm like, well, that's what I see in my head, okay? I see the women from The Beguiled. Yeah, take that, cinephiles. Anyways, yeah, I really liked it. And like I said, I understand like people's disappointment with it. I don't understand hating it though, and I don't understand people seemingly like completely missing the point, especially people that claim to be fans of the franchise. If you're a fan of the Halloween franchise, as I established in the beginning, it's always been all over the place. It's always swung for the fences in its own way. It's always done its own thing. It's always been willing to shake shit up and change things around and do reboots and blah, blah, blah. It's always done that. So I don't understand why it's like so shocking. I can understand up front feeling shocked by it, like up front being like, whoa, that's not what I was looking for. But if you thought about it for a little bit after you watch the movie, you think you would be able to connect at least a few of these dots. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just super cool, super smart, super awesome. The cineast, good guy Shaun, cineast, Halloween ends lover. But yeah, I think you should. If you haven't checked it out, I would definitely suggest giving it a go. I ended up not being able to go to the theater, so I just watched it on Peacock, which I think they left a lot of money on the table, honestly. I think if this had just been a theatrical release, I probably would have ended up going to see it in the theater. I would have found a way to go see it in the theater instead of watching it at home. But, you know, I have to say, I got two kids, one of them being like 3 months old. It's really, you know, it's kind of too young for babysitters and stuff. I was very pleased that I was able to dim the lights, hang out with my wife on a Saturday night, put the 3-month-old to bed, send the 5-year-old to grandma's, and enjoy the movie. So, and get to watch it again too in such short succession. That was definitely a boon because it really just made me think a lot. And I was just thinking about the essence of the movie and the themes of the movie and what was successful and what wasn't successful. I mean, there's probably lots of criticisms I could probably lodge against it in terms of, does it perfectly connect all the dots? No, I don't think it does. It's like one of those things, like I understand what you're getting enough for it to work for me, but I can understand some people maybe feeling a little bit lost. But at the same time, I don't know. I felt very obvious to me. It felt very obvious to me what was going on. But like I said, maybe that's just me. or I could also be completely wrong. David Gordon Green, Danny McBride, the other writers, they come out and be like, no, this is all literal. It's all literally happening. And I'd be like, well, I would probably like it less if it was all literally happening, but I would still I would enjoy it for what it was. That's what I'd say. All right, I got to stop talking. I'm all done. Just like Halloween, everything must come to an end, as has this video. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description. Check them out. Make sure to go follow us over on Odyssey. We do lots of live streams, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. Yeah, it'd be cool to see some of you there. We talk culture. We talk movies. We have a good time. We cut it up. All right. Adios.